Before we dive in, drop a quick hi in the comments. It may seem small, but trust me, it really helps YouTube share this story with more sci-fi fans like us. I'd love to see who's watching.
The first human railgun strike in history crossed the void without a sound. A tungsten slug, 20 kilograms of engineered silence, tore through the dark between two worlds and found its target. A Kratari warship gliding above the stones of Vane's reach. Impact. A rose-colored bloom flared across the void, a brief, perfect sunrise before vanishing into cold night. Molten fragments drifted outward like dying stars. On the bridge of the Terran Strategic Union vessel, Osiris, Captain Dave Miller stood in the blue half-light of the tactical display, a soldier shaped by discipline and long campaigns, calm even when the void burned. The asteroid belt shimmered before him, rings of dust and iron circling a gas giant the color of rust. His crew watched in silence. The first shot of the frontier war had been fired, and the silence that followed weighed heavier than the weapon that made it. "Target status?" Miller asked. Commander Rafik al-Qadim's calm never broke. The Egyptian strategist treated battle the way others treated music, all rhythm, no noise. Contact 1 destroyed. 2 remaining in formation. They are holding distance. The Kratari cruisers glowed as blue silhouettes in the hologram, moving in slow arcs that overlapped each other. Their plasma drives pulsed with a rhythm too deliberate to be random. "They are not retreating," said Lieutenant Yakamura Ren from the electronic warfare console. "They are repositioning, almost like they are performing a pattern." "They are," Rafik murmured. "They treat battle as conversation. Each maneuver is a phrase. That strike we fired may have been interpreted as a statement." "Then we will speak clearly," Miller said. "Weapons, reload main rail batteries, engineering, stabilize magnetic alignment. Petrescu, keep us inside this debris corridor. I want minimal profile exposure." The Osiris slid behind a cluster of tumbling rocks. Fragments of old mining platforms spun past, stripped of life by the vacuum. Static laced through comms. Vane's reach was a graveyard of old industry and new hostility. Miller studied the enemy's movement again. The 2 surviving Kratari ships turned together, mirroring one another's spin. Their plasma emitters brightened until they were white cores. "They're about to fire," he said quietly. A breath later, the first plasma stream cut through space. It curved, guided by a magnetic field that shimmered like a blue ribbon. The beam struck an asteroid near the Osiris, turning it into vapor. The shockwave battered the ship's hull. The deck trembled underfoot, the air filled with the metallic scent of ozone. "Shields collapsing on Vector 3, shouted Lieutenant Otto Leclerc from engineering. "Reinforcing, hold steady." "Return fire," Miller ordered. The railgun screamed. 12 magnetized projectiles left the barrels, invisible but for the faint distortion of ionized trails. They cut through the Kratari's plasma streams and hit one of the cruiser's broadside. The alien ship folded, its biometal hull rippling like wet fabric before a burst of internal plasma scattered it into fragments. The second cruiser spun out of formation, erratic for the first time. Rafik leaned over the tactical display. "They are confused. The loss of symmetry has broken their command rhythm." "Then we break it further," Miller said. "Ren, mimic their transmission pattern but alter the intervals. Make it sound like one of them is answering out of tune." Lieutenant Yakamura Ren's hands moved across the console, the ship's electronic warfare expert, turning interference into a weapon. The Kratari formation hesitated. Their color patterns shifted rapidly through the visible spectrum, flickers of green and violet dancing across their hulls. "Engineering, railguns cold," Leclerc called. "We can fire again in 20 seconds. "They will not wait 20 seconds, Rafik warned. "Their plasma coils are charging." Miller turned toward the helm. "Petrescu, Vector 22. Downspin. Full burn. Bring us between the wrecks." The Osiris surged forward, inertia pressing every man on the bridge into his harness. The ship's engines left streaks of blue ion glow across the black. They skimmed past the corpse of the first alien cruiser. Through the viewport, Miller saw the cracked surface of the biometal hull flickering with dying bioluminescence, pale greens fading like candlelight. He thought of it not as victory, but as data. "Railgun's hot," Leclerc confirmed. "Fire one," Miller said. The slug hit the second Kratari ship mid-spin. The alien vessel fractured along a seam of glowing coral, venting gas and fragments. The plasma weapon inside detonated, painting the belt with ghostly fire. The Osiris moved through the expanding debris field. Broken shards of the alien hull spun lazily, reflecting the light of distant suns. For a long moment, no one spoke. Only the vibration of cooling rail coils filled the air. Commander Al-Qadim finally broke the silence. "They fought in rhythm. We answered in noise." Miller nodded. "Then we will teach them a new rhythm." He looked toward the dark edge of the asteroid belt. Beyond it, new signatures were emerging. Faint, harmonic pings in the background noise. More ships, perhaps an entire Kratari fleet, drawn by the echo of their fallen. The first battle was over. The war had truly begun. "Record everything," Miller said. "Patterns, frequencies, debris composition. Every piece of this is a lesson." "Yes, Captain," Rafik replied. The bridge lights dimmed to red as the ship entered silent running. Outside, the remains of the Kratari cruisers drifted like shattered mirrors. Their colors faded, the final pulses of a language that had failed to understand silence. The Osiris turned slowly, its engines humming a low metallic tone. Behind it, the first confirmed alien wreck spun through the darkness, bioluminescent veins flickering out one by one. The void of Vane's reach was quiet again, but the quiet no longer felt empty. Miller watched the display until the last signal died. Then he said, softly but clearly, "Observation is our weapon. Adaptation, our war." No one answered. Every man on that bridge understood. This was only the beginning. Humanity had just learned how to fight back. The wreck still drifted outside the viewport when dawn reached Vane's reach. Its hull, once glowing with green light, was now dull gray. Fragments spun slowly through the debris field, turning endlessly in the dark. Captain Dave Miller stood on the bridge, hands behind his back, watching until the last spark faded. He had not moved for 6 hours. Around him, the crew worked in low voices. Commander Rafik Al-Qadim sorted sensor logs into a dozen data chains. Lieutenant Otto Leclerc argued quietly with the engineering team over coolant ratios. Lieutenant Radu Petrescu, the ship's helmsman, guided the Osiris through the wreck field with steady, near-silent thruster bursts. The ship still carried the scars of the previous fight: scorched plating, cracked shielding nodes, a constant hum in the decks where magnetic coils realigned themselves. Sergeant Malik Tades, head of the ship's ground detachment, entered from the lift, a layer of carbon dust on his armor. "Recovery teams finished marking debris sectors 1 through 5, he said. "We found fragments of their weapons arrays. Organic material fused to the metal. Looks half-grown, half-forged." "Secure samples for analysis," Miller said, "and get your men rotated through the mess. They have been outside too long." Tadessa nodded and left without another word. Miller turned back to the viewport. Beyond the drifting wrecks, the faint light of Hellion Prime shimmered against the edge of space, a reminder of home, too far to see clearly. Rafik approached, carrying a slate. "Preliminary data complete. We have mapped the plasma frequency of their weapons. There is a repeating harmonic every 11.6 seconds. It is intentional." Miller's eyes narrowed. "A rhythm." "Exactly. Their firing sequence is not random. It is a chant. They open every battle with the same pattern. When we broke it, they lost coordination." "Then they will change the song," Miller said, "and we will be ready." Yakamura Ren looked up from his console. "Captain, we are receiving an encoded transmission from Hellion Prime. Priority 1. On screen." The symbol of the Terran Strategic Union appeared, followed by a voice from Fleet Command. Captain Miller, your combat logs from Vane's Reach are confirmed. You are ordered to return to Helion Prime for assessment and debrief. Frontier War Protocol is now in effect. The channel closed. The bridge fell silent again. Protocol 1 meant formal war. No more observation missions, no diplomatic channels. Every ship on the frontier would now operate under full combat directives. Helm, set course for Helion Prime, Miller said. Minimum burn. Keep us hidden from long-range scans. Radu Petrescu acknowledged and engaged the thrusters. The Osiris began its slow drift away from the debris field. The shattered Qatari vessel receded into darkness until it became one more piece of rock among thousands. 3 days later, the ship entered Helion orbit. Docking clamps locked onto the hull with a sharp metallic snap. Outside the viewports, repair drones swarmed across the plating, sparks drifting like fireflies against the red clouds below. The crew moved through the narrow corridors with a mixture of exhaustion and pride. They were the first to fight the new enemy and live. In the ship's wardroom, Miller met with his officers around a projection of Vane's Reach, rendered in sharp lines of white and blue. Rafik spoke first. Analysis of recovered data confirms our assumption. Their command structure is musical in nature. Each fleet acts as a single composition, every ship following a shared tempo. When one element is disrupted, the entire rhythm collapses. Can we use that? Miller asked. We can imitate it, Yakamura said. Transmit false rhythms to mislead their targeting. But there is risk. If we mimic them too well, they may think we are responding and try to communicate. Let them, Miller replied. Every message teaches us something. Otto Leclerc gestured to the ship schematic. Repairs will finish within 20 hours. We can strengthen the railgun alignment and add coolant flow to reduce reload time by 9 seconds. Make it happen. Malik Tadesse studied the debris analysis on his own screen. Their ground equipment matches their ship design. Organic patterns. If we ever fight them planetside, the terrain will change around them. Adaptive architecture. Miller filed the information silently. Then we learned to fight moving walls. At the edge of the Helion system, the Qatari were already preparing their answer. Deep beneath the methane seas of Thalkor Se, the oracle Vokwell of the Third Echo floated within a cathedral of light. The water shimmered with electrical pulses that formed long harmonic chords. Around the oracle, warrior castes knelt in concentric circles, their carapaces reflecting the rhythm. Vokwell spoke through vibration and color. The noise-born species has struck a discord. They killed without rhythm. They broke the symmetry. We will rewrite the pattern. From the depths rose the design of a new formation, curved trajectories overlapping like a spiral shell. The resonant spiral. Each ship would carry fragments of false rhythm to confuse any imitators. When they met the humans again, the void would sing with layered deception. Back on Helion Prime, the Osiris prepared to depart. Cargo pods locked into place, hull seams sealed. The crew moved through final checklists with wordless efficiency. Miller stood by the observation window of the command deck, watching the faint glimmer of stars beyond the dock. Rafik joined him. Fleet Command is assigning us to the Osper Belt. Search and rescue for missing convoy vessels. They are not missing, Miller said. They are bait. Rafik's expression did not change. Then we will treat them as such. Signal readiness, Miller ordered. We leave within the hour. The convoy's coordinates led them into a maze of rock and frozen dust. Radar returns danced like static ghosts. The belt was littered with old mining stations, long abandoned and spinning silently. The Osiris advanced with thrusters at half power, sensors wide open. Multiple signals ahead, Yakamura said. Mass and heat signatures consistent with civilian haulers. Any escort? None. Miller leaned forward. Rafik. Pattern check. The commander studied the readings. The spacing between those ships, too precise. They are arranged on harmonic nodes. Trap confirmed, Miller said. All hands, combat stations. The first Kratari ship emerged from the shadow of a fractured station, plasma filaments glowing white. Then another, and another, forming the spiral. Their drives pulsed in overlapping intervals that shimmered through the Osiris's sensors, flooding every screen with interference. "They are jamming our target algorithms," Yakamura warned. "Switch to manual," Miller said. "All departments, no computer synchronization, fire by instinct." Otto Leclerc grinned with humor. Old school it is. The ship's magnetic rails charged, their hum rising to a deep, resonant growl. Across the bridge, men aligned sights by hand, judging trajectories through the swirling dust. When Miller gave the word, 12 railguns spoke as one, except not one. Each fired milliseconds apart, irregular, human. The belt lit with violent flashes. 2 Kratari ships ruptured instantly, plasma spilling into space. Others veered off, their patterns collapsing into chaos. One Terran frigate beside the Osiris took a direct hit and vanished in white fire. "Continue firing," Miller said. His voice stayed level, but the air on the bridge trembled from recoil. Another alien vessel broke apart. The rest withdrew into the darkness, their signals fading beyond sensor range. "Cease fire," Rafik said quietly. The bridge filled with the smell of hot metal and sweat. Damage reports scrolled across every screen. 37 men lost. 1 ship gone. The cost of learning. Miller stared at the empty radar horizon. "They learned," he said. "So did we." He closed the tactical display, leaving only the stars. Outside, fragments of the destroyed frigate floated in slow arcs, its beacon blinking once every 10 seconds. A human rhythm, stubborn and imperfect, echoing through the silence between battles. The beacon from the destroyed frigate blinked against the dark, like a heartbeat that refused to stop. Every 10 seconds, a pulse of white light swept across the fractured stones of the Osper Belt, painting the Osiris in ghost color. The bridge was silent, except for the slow crackle of cooling rails. Captain Dave Miller kept his eyes on the sensor display. The readings from the beacon were wrong. The signal's phase angle shifted by fractions of a degree with every pulse, as if someone, or something, was rewriting its pattern. "Commander," he said, "tell me that beacon is ours." Rafik al-Qadim studied the waveform. "Not anymore. It is transmitting on a mixed frequency. Human distress and alien harmonic overlay." "Meaning?" "They are talking through our dead." Miller felt the muscles in his jaw tighten. "Shut it down." Yakamura Ren tried to jam the transmission. Static filled the channel for a moment, then cleared. The beacon kept pulsing. A new return appeared on radar, small, metallic, moving straight toward the wreck. "They are coming for it," Radu Petrescu said. "Velocity minimal, vector precise, probably a retrieval drone." Miller turned toward the tactical console. "Sergeant Tedeschi, prep your detachment. Boarding action." The hangar smelled of lubricant and scorched insulation. Men moved among the drop craft, strapping weapons to exosuits, sealing helmets. The debris field outside was a labyrinth of broken hulls and drifting ore. The wreck of the frigate hung at the center, like a tomb. Tadesse checked the magnetic locks on his coil rifle. "Orders are simple," he told his team. "We intercept the Kratari drone, recover the beacon core, and get out. Keep your fire disciplined. If they board us, shoot center mass and keep moving." The airlock cycled. The small shuttle detached from the Osiris and glided toward the wreck. Pieces of metal tumbled past, glinting in the weak starlight. No sound, just the soft hiss of suit oxygen and the steady thump of hearts through armor sensors. Inside the wreck, lights from helmet lamps cut across twisted corridors. Frozen bodies floated near bulkheads, faces pale beneath the frost. The beacon was still attached to the aft compartment, pulsing through the darkness. Its glow painted the walls in alternating human white and alien blue. "There," Tadesse said. "Secure it." Corporal Iman floated forward with a cutter. He had just set the tool to the beacon when the corridor lights shifted color, green to violet. The harmonic pitch in their comms changed. Something alive moved behind the walls, a slow ripple through the wreckage. "Contact!" Tadesse whispered. Panels peeled open. The creature that emerged was built from alloy and translucent flesh. A Kratari drone, but half-grown, its body still wet with biometal fluid. Its limbs moved in a precise rhythm, each motion accompanied by a flash of color. It was transmitting through the hull, rhythmic pulses in sync with the ship's internal systems. "Fire!" Tadesse ordered. Coil rifles barked magnetized slugs. The drone shuddered and folded backward, limbs flaring into arcs of plasma before freezing solid. The team advanced, cutting the beacon free, but the song did not stop. It came from deeper within the ship, echoing along the corridors, vibrating through the soles of their boots. "Captain," Tadesse said into his comm, "we have movement. Multiple signatures waking up inside the wreck." Miller's reply came steady. "Abort recovery. Fall back to shuttle. I am bringing the Osiris closer." They turned to leave. The walls themselves began to move, plates sliding and locking together, closing paths that had been opened seconds before. A pulse of violet light rolled through the ship like a heartbeat. The wreck was alive. "Move!" Tadesse shouted. His men pushed through narrowing corridors, firing at joints where the metal flexed. The shuttle appeared ahead, its hatch open, engines hot. One by one they jumped through, the last man dragging the beacon core behind him. "Everyone aboard," Tadesse said. "Go!" The shuttle launched from the collapsing wreck. Behind them, the frigate's remains folded in on themselves, a slow implosion of biometal and stone. The false beacon died in silence. Back on the Osiris, the captured beacon lay in containment. It hummed with residual heat. Yakamura scanned its core. "Captain, the alien code embedded in this signal is adaptive. It was using the beacon as a carrier to map our communications." "Did it succeed?" Miller asked. "Partially. Enough to mimic our distress calls. They can lure us with our own signals now." Rafik folded his hands behind his back. "They are learning faster." "So are we," Miller said. "Seal the core. Prepare for analysis under isolation." Outside the viewport, the Osper belt glittered with the debris of battle. The remaining Terran ships drifted nearby, holding formation around the Osiris like guards at a wounded king's side. Static from the destroyed wreck still whispered across comms, faint as breath. Miller stared into the dark. They wanted us to come for our dead. They wanted to watch how we move. "And now?" Rafik asked. "Now they will know what happens when we move twice." He turned toward the tactical display. Faint new signals were blooming on the edge of the grid, slow, deliberate, forming the beginnings of another spiral. The Kratari were already composing their next attack. "Sound readiness," Miller said. Red light bathed the bridge. The Osiris pivoted, engines humming, rail coils charging. The silence before the next volley felt heavier than gravity itself. The war at the frontier was no longer a series of isolated battles. It had become a conversation neither side could stop. The war reached the moon in dust and silence. Hellion's gray satellite hung above the planet like a dead ember, its surface veined with the scars of old mining. From orbit, the Osiris looked down through drifting ash clouds, her hull still blackened from the battle at Helion Prime. Captain Dave Miller stood beside the viewport and watched the pods fall. Thin streaks of light tore across the darkness. 50 human descent capsules, each one a metal seed wrapped in flame. They vanished into the cloud layer, leaving faint trails behind. The captain's voice was calm over the channel. "Ground detachment, report when feet are down. Priority is the deuterium silos." Sergeant Malik Tadesse heard him through the static. Inside his pod, the restraints shuddered as retro thrusters fired. Gravity caught, then released. Impact. The pod slammed into ash and slid sideways before coming to rest against a broken ridge. The hatch blew open and gray dust poured inside. The sky above was the color of iron. No wind, no sound except the crackle of cooling metal. Tadesse stepped out, magnet boots crunching on glassy soil. Around him, the other pods were landing, small flares blooming and fading in the distance. The plane stretched toward the black silhouettes of the mining domes. "Alpha Squad formed," he said into comms. "Beta and Gamma, sound off." Voices answered through interference. Some were distorted, others missing entirely. "Lost contact with 2 squads," reported Corporal Iman. "Dust interference is killing radar." "Then we go by eyes and instinct," Tadesse said. He pointed toward the nearest dome. "Move!" They advanced in a low line, rifles raised. Each man's visor showed faint traces of magnetic fields, ripples moving through the ground like echoes. The readings were wrong, oscillating too regularly. The enemy was already here. At the base of the dome, the doors had been peeled open from the inside. Tadesse signaled halt. He crouched, scanning the edges of the breach. The metal looked half melted, half grown, as if the structure had been alive and forced to split. Inside, darkness swallowed their lights. The tunnel smelled of ozone and old machinery. Pipes lined the walls. Dust drifted in slow spirals. Somewhere below, faint blue flashes pulsed in rhythm. "Ren's jammers aren't reaching this deep," Tadesse muttered. "They are building something." They moved downward, boots clanging softly on metal ladders. At the lowest level, the corridor opened into a cavern the size of a hangar. Biometal growths clung to the rock, pulsing with internal light. Between them, Kratari drones worked in perfect unison, assembling tall pylons that resonated with a steady hum. Every vibration crawled up the men's bones. Tadesse raised his rifle. "Mark targets. 3 bursts, then grenades." He counted the rhythm. The alien machines moved every 3 seconds. Lift, weld, pause. He timed the first shot between the pauses and fired. The slug tore through the nearest drone, shattering its translucent casing. The rest turned instantly, their lights flickering through violent color shifts. "Break rhythm," he shouted. "Fire irregular." The cavern filled with thunder. Human weapons cracked out of time, echoing off the walls in chaotic bursts. The drones' coordination collapsed. Their responses lagged, plasma bolts scattering harmlessly into rock. The pylons began to tremble under stray rounds. One toppled, hitting the next, setting off a chain of collapses. Sparks and dust filled the air. "Fall back to the shaft," Tadesse ordered. They retreated through the smoke. Behind them, alien machines screeched in subsonic tones that made the walls vibrate. A pulse wave slammed through the tunnel, knocking 2 men off their feet. Tadesse dragged them upright and pushed forward until daylight bled through the exit. Outside, the plane was no longer quiet. On the horizon, other domes were lighting up with blue fire. The Kratari had landed in force. "Command, this is Tadesse," he said. "Enemy resonance pylons active across grid sectors 7 through 10. Request orbital mapping." Rafiq's calm voice replied from orbit. "Understood. Satellite scans confirm multiple clusters. We are feeding coordinates to you now. Captain Miller authorizes heavy support." High above, the Osiris adjusted her orbit. Magnetic rails aligned. The first salvo streaked down through the thin atmosphere, each round trailing vapor. Impacts flared like miniature dawns along the horizon. "Perfect," Tadesse said. "We advance between impact zones. Keep the rhythm broken." He led his men across the ash plains toward the next dome. Dust storms rose from the bombardment, hiding them from enemy sensors. Through the haze, flashes of movement showed other squads closing in. Silhouettes of soldiers running, pausing, firing. The moon shook under distant detonations. Somewhere ahead, a larger structure loomed. A cluster of silos half buried in rock, their sides glowing faintly with internal heat. "The deuterium plant," said Iman. "Then that is where they will make their stand," Tadesse replied. He checked his rifle's charge. No patterns. No mercy. They moved toward the silos as the ground trembled beneath their feet, and the gray horizon pulsed with blue light. The war reached the moon in dust and silence. Hellion's gray satellite hung above the planet like a dead ember, its surface veined with the scars of old mining. From orbit, the Osiris looked down through drifting ash clouds, her hull still blackened from the battle at Helion Prime. Captain Dave Miller stood beside the viewport and watched the pods fall. Thin streaks of light tore across the darkness, 50 human descent capsules, each one a metal seed wrapped in flame. They vanished into the cloud layer, leaving faint trails behind. The captain's voice was calm over the channel. "Ground detachment, report when feet are down. Priority is the deuterium silos." Sergeant Malik Tadesi heard him through the static. Inside his pod, the restraints shuddered as retro thrusters fired. Gravity caught, then released. Impact! The pod slammed into ash and slid sideways before coming to rest against a broken ridge. The hatch blew open and gray dust poured inside. The sky above was the color of iron. No wind, no sound except the crackle of cooling metal. Tadesi stepped out, magnet boots crunching on glassy soil. Around him, the other pods were landing, small flares blooming and fading in the distance. The plane stretched toward the black silhouettes of the mining domes. "Alpha Squad formed," he said into comms. "Beta and Gamma, sound off." Voices answered through interference. Some were distorted, others missing entirely. "Lost contact with 2 squads," reported Corporal Iman. "Dust interference is killing radar." "Then we go by eyes and instinct," Tadesi said. He pointed toward the nearest dome. "Move!" They advanced in a low line, rifles raised. Each man's visor showed faint traces of magnetic fields, ripples moving through the ground like echoes. The readings were wrong, oscillating too regularly. The enemy was already here. At the base of the dome, the doors had been peeled open from the inside. Tadesi signaled halt. He crouched, scanning the edges of the breach. The metal looked half melted, half grown, as if the structure had been alive and forced to split. Inside, darkness swallowed their lights. The tunnels smelled of ozone and old machinery. Pipes lined the walls. Dust drifted in slow spirals. Somewhere below, faint blue flashes pulsed in rhythm. "Ren's jammers aren't reaching this deep," Tadesi muttered. "They're building something." They moved downward, boots clanging softly on metal ladders. At the lowest level, the corridor opened into a cavern the size of a hangar. Biometal growths clung to the rock, pulsing with internal light. Between them, Kratari drones worked in perfect unison, assembling tall pylons that resonated with a steady hum. Every vibration crawled up the men's bones. Tadesi raised his rifle. "Mark targets, 3 bursts, then grenades." He counted the rhythm. The alien machines moved every 3 seconds. Lift, weld, pause. He timed the first shot between the pauses and fired. The slug tore through the nearest drone, shattering its translucent casing. The rest turned instantly, their lights flickering through violent color shifts. "Break rhythm!" he shouted. "Fire irregular!" The cavern filled with thunder. Human weapons cracked out of time, echoing off the walls in chaotic bursts. The drone's coordination collapsed. Their responses lagged, plasma bolts scattering harmlessly into rock. The pylons began to tremble under stray rounds. One toppled, hitting the next, setting off a chain of collapses. Sparks and dust filled the air. "Fall back to the shaft," Tadesi ordered. They retreated through the smoke. Behind them, alien machines screeched in subsonic tones that made the walls vibrate. A pulse wave slammed through the tunnel, knocking 2 men off their feet. Tadesi dragged them upright and pushed forward until daylight bled through the exit. Outside, the plane was no longer quiet. On the horizon, other domes were lighting up with blue fire. The Kratari had landed in force. "Command, this is Tadesi," he said. "Enemy resonance pylons active across grid sectors 7 through 10. Request orbital mapping." Rafiq's calm voice replied from orbit. "Understood. Satellite scans confirm multiple clusters. We are feeding coordinates to you now. Captain Miller authorizes heavy support." High above, the Osiris adjusted her orbit. Magnetic rails aligned. The first salvo streaked down through the thin atmosphere, each round trailing vapor. Impacts flared like miniature dawns along the horizon. "Perfect," Tadesse said. "We advance between impact zones. Keep the rhythm broken." He led his men across the ash plains toward the next dome. Dust storms rose from the bombardment, hiding them from enemy sensors. Through the haze, flashes of movement showed other squads closing in. Silhouettes of soldiers running, pausing, firing. The moon shook under distant detonations. Somewhere ahead, a larger structure loomed. A cluster of silos half buried in rock, their sides glowing faintly with internal heat. "The deuterium plant," said Iman. "Then that is where they will make their stand," Tadesse replied. He checked his rifle's charge. No patterns, no mercy. They moved toward the silos as the ground trembled beneath their feet and the gray horizon pulsed with blue light. The approach to the deuterium plant was slow and tense. Each step kicked up fine dust that clung to their armor and dimmed their helmet lamps. The silos towered ahead, half-buried cylinders breathing faint streams of vapor into the cold. Thin lightning flickered along their ribs, residual energy from the Kratari resonance pylons now taking shape around the complex. Tadesse crouched behind a ridge and studied the pattern through his scope. The aliens were positioning the pylons in perfect symmetry, 12 points around the silos, each one pulsing in turn. In the center moved a taller figure, its translucent frame streaked with black. The movements were graceful, almost priestly. "That is their leader," he said quietly. "Mark the one in the center." Rafiq's voice came through the comm. "We are tracking your signal. That configuration matches an entry in the recovered code. Designation: War Speaker Nathera." Tadesse exhaled slowly. "Understood." He switched channels. "Alpha Squad, we advance under interference. Beta and Gamma, flank left and right. On my mark." He counted the alien rhythm. 11 seconds between pulses. On the 10th, he stood and waved forward. The squad surged from the ridge in a storm of dust. Coil rifles spat tungsten slugs, each fired a heartbeat off from the next. The irregular rhythm shredded the Kratari formation before it could adjust. 2 pylons exploded in cascades of blue plasma. Nathera turned toward the humans. The War Speaker's body emitted a deep harmonic that rippled through the ground. Rock fractured underfoot, throwing men to the soil. Tadesse jammed his helmet comms to full white noise. The roar blanked out the chant and steadied his aim. He fired 3 times, walking the shots up the alien's torso. The War Speaker staggered but did not fall. "Ren!" Tadesse shouted. "I need those jammers now!" From orbit, Lieutenant Yakamura activated the harmonic devices dropped earlier. Across the plain, thin towers unfolded and began to hum with chaotic static. The clear rhythm of the Kratari chant dissolved into broken feedback. The pylons flickered, their lights falling out of sequence. "Disruption achieved," Rafiq confirmed. "Orbital coil guns ready for precision strike. Designate targets." Tadesse looked up. "Negative on strike. We are too close. We finish it here." He led the charge straight through the collapsing perimeter. The ground team moved like ghosts through the drifting dust, firing short, sharp bursts. When they reached the central platform, the War Speaker was trying to connect his body to the silo conduit, merging with it. Biometal tendrils crawled across the surface, searching for purchase. Tadesse pulled a shaped charge from his belt, thumbed the arming stud, and hurled it at the conduit. The explosion tore through the connection, flinging Nathera backward. The alien struck the base of a pylon and crumpled, its colors fading to gray. The remaining drones froze mid-movement, lights flickering out one by one. For a moment, there was nothing but the hiss of settling dust. "Objective secure," Tadesse said into his comm. "Enemy command neutralized. Silo intact." Above, the Osiris held station. Through the haze of atmosphere, its rails glowed faintly, still hot from the bombardment. Captain Miller's voice came across the channel, calm as ever. "Confirmed, Sergeant? Excellent work. Retrieve your people and prepare for evac. We have more signals rising beyond the ridge." Tadesse looked around at his surviving men. Half of Alpha Squad still stood. The rest lay motionless among the rocks. He checked each in turn, marking their positions for retrieval. No one spoke. The silence felt earned. "Understood, Captain," he said. "We will hold until relief arrives." He climbed to the top of the ridge. From there, the battlefield stretched in every direction, ash plains littered with broken pylons, the faint gleam of the silos still intact. The horizon burned with the reflection of the orbital strikes. Overhead, the Osiris crossed the sky like a slow star. Rafiq's voice came softly through the static. "Telemetry shows residual movement beneath the tunnels. Something is still alive down there." Tadesse watched the dust drift over the cracked ground. "Then it will learn what happens when it surfaces." He shut off the comm and stood for a while in the thin light. The air tasted of metal and ozone. For the first time since the war began, the surface of the ash moon was quiet. But under the soles of his boots, he could feel faint tremors. Steady, measured, almost musical. He turned toward the distant glimmer of orbit and whispered to himself, "We hold the moon. The music changes." 3 days after the dust settled on the ash moon, Helion's sky still burned with wreckage. The debris of 2 fleets drifted in slow orbits, fragments of metal catching the twin suns like mirrors. Below, the desert world glowed faintly from impact scars. Around it circled a patchwork station built from broken hulls and scavenged plating. Forge Station, the first monument to survival and defiance. The Osiris hung at its center, scarred but whole. Docking clamps held her steady, while engineers in gray suits welded new armor over the wounds from Helion. In the command deck, Captain Dave Miller stood beside Commander Rafiq Al-Qadim, watching data scroll across the holographic table. The ship's hum had become familiar background noise, like a heartbeat the crew no longer heard. "Fuel reserves from the moon secured," Rafiq reported. "We can field 7 ships. That includes Osiris, Tlaloc, and Fenrir. 2 frigates barely holding, but they will fly." Miller nodded, enough to make a point. "Fleet Command wants more than a point," Rafiq said. "They want a counterstroke. The orders came an hour ago. We are to move through Marrowgate and strike whatever the Kratari left on the far side." Miller studied the projection. The gate filled the room as a storm of numbers. 2 suns orbiting a single point, gravitational tides folding in upon themselves. Within the chaos shimmered energy signatures, the remains of alien jump infrastructure. "They will expect us," he said. "They will," Rafiq answered, "but they will expect a pattern." Miller's eyes flicked to the crew. Yakamura Ren hunched over his console, tuning the new harmonic filters. Otto Leclerc was reviewing power flow data, lips moving silently as he counted voltages. Radu Petrescu sat at the helm, calm as stone, hands resting lightly on the controls. Malik Tadesse's voice came from the surface detachment channel, drilling the new recruits in rhythm-breaking fire sequences. They were tired men, all of them, but their focus was absolute. "Transmit to the fleet," Miller said. "Formation Delta. We move at first light cycle." The order was relayed across the station within seconds. Engines came alive, flashing pale blue against the metal spires. The human fleet formed a loose ring and then turned toward the distant shimmer of Marrowgate. The twin suns of Marrowgate rose out of black space like 2 blades. Light bent and twisted between them, a visible distortion that made the stars seem to drift. As the fleet approached, Petrescu's voice stayed low and steady. "Gravity waves stable for the moment. We enter the corridor in 30 seconds." "Understood," Miller said. "Maintain noise discipline. No synchronized transmissions." Inside the Osiris, every light dimmed to combat hue. Railgun crews strapped in. The ship trembled as the first gravitational surge brushed against the hull. Outside, streaks of white fire appeared, the reflections of the twin suns on metallic debris. But some of those reflections moved. "Contacts," Yakamura said. "At least 20 ships. Configuration. Irregular." Rafiq frowned. "Irregular?" "They are mimicking our formation," Yakamura said. No symmetry. Random intervals. Miller felt a cold realization settle in his chest. They learned faster than expected. Bring weapons online. The alien fleet emerged from the glare, each vessel pulsing with fractured light. Plasma filaments twisted around them like ribbons. The mirror spiral had arrived. Rafiq's voice was calm. They are broadcasting on human bands, old training frequencies. Yakamura overlaid the signal on the main screen. The sound that filled the bridge was not a voice, but a distorted echo of human comms. Phrases chopped and rearranged into alien cadence. It was like listening to the war speak back. They are copying our noise, Rafiq said quietly. Miller straightened. Then, we give them something new to copy. All ships, open fire. Random intervals. Full charge. The void erupted. Railguns thundered, firing from every direction without coordination. The mirror spiral answered with its own chaos. Slugs and plasma met mid-space, scattering sparks across the darkness. 2 human frigates vanished in the first exchange, their hulls torn apart by reflected plasma arcs. The enemy lost 3 of its own, caught in overlapping gravity waves that tore them to fragments. Reactor strain climbing, Leclerc warned. Magnetic alignment unstable. Hold it together, Miller said. Petrescu, Vector 15. Bring us between their wings. The Osiris dove through the maelstrom, engines screaming. Gravitational tides pulled at the hull. The stars stretched into thin lines. Petrescu fought the controls, adjusting thrust in microbursts. The ship steadied just long enough for Leclerc to rebalance the power grid. Ready for overcharge, the engineer said through clenched teeth. Do it! The rails charged until the deck vibrated. Energy bled from the conduits in blue sparks. Miller waited for the next surge of gravity, then gave the order. Fire, triple burst! 3 tungsten slugs left the barrels almost simultaneously, each one riding the wave of the last. They crossed the distance in less than a heartbeat and struck the lead alien vessel at the center of the spiral. The impact tore through its biometal hull. Plasma erupted outward in a silent explosion that consumed everything nearby. The gravitational field twisted, folding the shockwave back onto the remaining ships. The mirror spiral imploded. Target destroyed, Rafiq said. His voice barely carried over the alarms. Secondary explosions through the formation. Maintain course, Miller ordered. Keep firing until you see nothing left to learn from. For 10 minutes, the battle raged inside the gate. Every shot and countershot warped under gravity, streaking in impossible arcs. Then, one by one, the remaining Kratari ships broke formation and retreated toward the far horizon, leaving trails of burning plasma that faded into the shimmer of the suns. Silence returned, broken only by the creak of cooling metal. Status, Miller said. Leclerc exhaled. Hull breaches sealed. Reactor stable. Casualties light considering. All this. Rafiq studied the tactical map. Enemy fleet in full retreat. We hold Marrowgate. Miller looked at the screens. The debris of both fleets drifted through the distorted light, spiraling slowly toward the twin suns. He felt no triumph, only the calm that followed every necessary act. Transmit to the fleet, he said. Message simple. We are through. Later, the Osiris hovered at the edge of the gravity corridor. Outside, the wrecks glowed like falling embers. Inside, the bridge lights returned to white. Rafiq stood beside his captain, reading final telemetry. They will adapt again, he said. Vauquois will compose a new rhythm. Miller nodded. Then we keep changing the tune. He turned to look at the stars beyond the gate. Alien space, uncharted and waiting. The fleet formed up behind him, engines burning steady blue. Humanity had taken its first step beyond the line. We broke their rhythm, he said quietly. Now they know we have one of our own. The Osiris pivoted toward the distant systems, railguns cooling, hull scarred but proud. Behind her, Marrowgate shimmered like a wound in space, still glowing with the echoes of the battle. The counterpulse had begun. The battle at Marrowgate had ended 6 hours ago, but the Osiris still shuddered as if the echoes were following her. Hull plates rang softly when the drives changed vector. Each vibration reminded the crew that the enemy had finally learned to bleed. Captain Dave Miller watched the view through the forward screen. The twin suns of the gate burned behind them, their light caught on drifting wreckage. Ahead, the darkness looked clean for the first time in months. Rafiq al-Qadim's voice broke the quiet. "Fleet Command confirms, sir. We are to pursue through the corridor and probe the first hostile system beyond. Designation: Kareth's Verge." Miller nodded once. "Understood. Plot the course. Let's see what waits on the other side." Engines brightened, and the fleet slid through the shimmer of the gate. Gravity folded, stretched, and released them into alien sky. The system beyond looked like glass shattered across the stars. Fragments of crystal drifted around a black planet whose surface threw back every beam of light. Sensors struggled, images doubled and tripled. Yakamura Ren muttered, "That's not sensor ghosting. The planet itself is reflecting us." Rafiq leaned closer to the display. "Atish, the archives listed as an industrial node, unconfirmed. But those orbital shapes, I count 9. Outposts, maybe defense stations." Miller studied the reflections. Each orbiting object moved in perfect rhythm, like a set of mirrors turning on cue. "They want us to see ourselves before we die," he said quietly. "Prepare to advance. Keep formations loose. We've learned what happens when we move in time with them." The fleet began its approach. Plasma haze crawled across Atish's Terminator, painting red scars over the black surface. From the mirror plane below came flickers of motion, reflected images that didn't quite match reality. "Multiple returns," Yakamura reported. "I can't separate real targets from their reflections." "Then we stop using sensors," Miller said. "Line of sight only. Helm, take us in." Radu Petrescu's hands moved delicately over the controls. The Osiris dipped into the atmosphere's edge, the hull glowing faintly as friction built. Ahead, one of the mirrored shapes detached from the horizon and climbed toward them, unfolding like a petal of light. "Kratari craft," Rafiq confirmed, "but no transponder pattern I recognize." The enemy ship fired first. Plasma ribbons curved upward, each one splitting into reflections that filled the sky with false trajectories. The Osiris's shields flared white as the first bolt struck. "Return fire, manual aim," Miller ordered. The railguns thundered. Slugs cut through the atmosphere, tearing bright scars across the mirrored sky. One of the false images winked out. The real ship folded in half and fell, burning toward the surface. Its reflection continued to fight until it struck the ground and shattered like ice. Below them, the glass world erupted in light. Kratari fighters rose from hidden silos, their mirrored skins scattering beams in every direction. The fleet's formation dissolved into individual duels. Tlaloc traded fire with 2 interceptors and disintegrated one in a burst that painted the clouds crimson. A moment later, plasma tore through Tlaloc's flank. She drifted sideways, engines gone, venting blue fire. Leclerc's voice came through static. "Hull breaches on Fenrir, decks 5 and 6. They're holding for now." "Rafiq," Miller said, "we can't win a mirror fight. Find the source of those projections." Ren's fingers typed fast across his console. "Working. There's an energy nexus below the surface, deep, something generating phased light through the crust." "Then that's our target. Petrescu, bring us low enough to hit it. Tades, prep a landing team." Sergeant Malik Tades's pod slammed into the glass plane and slid half a kilometer before stopping. The hatch opened to a world that looked like frozen lightning. Every step left footprints shining with heat. His squad spread out, coil rifles sweeping arcs of reflected sky. "Command, Alpha Team down," he reported, "moving to locate the nexus." The horizon pulsed. Shapes moved in the glare. Kratari drones, their limbs thin as wire, each carrying a shard of mirror that bent light around their bodies. They advanced in eerie silence. Tadesse signaled his men. 3-beat fire pattern. Then break it. They expect rhythm. Don't give it. The first exchange turned the plane into a storm of light. Rifles cracked, reflections shattered, and the sound came back distorted from every direction. Drones fell, burning, but more replaced them, stepping out of their own mirrored corpses. The team pushed forward, each man firing on instinct rather than count. For a moment, confusion favored them. Then the ground shook. Wren's voice cut in over comms from orbit. "Detecting power surge under your position, Sergeant. The planet's field generator is spooling up." "Copy," Tadesse said. "We're almost there." He reached the edge of a crater. In its center, a tower of translucent crystal rose from the ground, alive with blue fire. Lightning raced up its sides into the sky. Through the glare he could see movement. An alien form, taller than the rest, its body pulsing in steady rhythm. "Target confirmed," Tadesse said. "Engaging." He fired a grenade. The explosion cracked the base of the tower. Fractures ran upward like veins. A harmonic roar shook the air, half sound, half pressure. His visor darkened automatically. From orbit, Miller saw the burst as a spike on every display. "That's our shot," he said. "Leclerc, channel all power to forward rails. Petrescu, lock the trajectory on that crater." Leclerc's voice came rough. "We'll melt the barrels." "Then melt them," Miller answered. "Fire!" The Osiris spat 2 slugs the size of shuttles. They entered the atmosphere as twin spears of plasma, crossing clouds and mirror storms in seconds. When they struck the crater, the surface of Atish erupted. A shockwave raced outward in concentric rings, each mirrored back upon itself until the entire hemisphere glowed. The light was blinding. On the plain, Tadesse and his men dove for cover as shards of molten glass rained around them. The tower collapsed inward, the alien figure consumed in the blast. Static flooded every channel. "Surface clear," Tadesse coughed. "The field's down." On the bridge, the displays steadied. Reflections vanished. The false fleets dissolved. Only the real enemy ships remained. Scattered, disoriented, exposed. "Fire control. All batteries," Miller said. "End it." The Osiris and her surviving escorts fired in sequence. Rail bursts and plasma beams carved through the remaining Kratari. One after another, they burned, spiraled downward, and struck the glass world in showers of orange light. Within minutes, the sky was empty. Rafik let out a slow breath. "Atish secure." Miller stared at the ruins below. "Then we start learning what they were protecting." Wren's console chimed softly. "Sir, I'm intercepting something from the planet's core. Data stream piggybacking our own telemetry. Coordinates." "Show me," Miller said. The holographic map appeared, a single point deep within Kratari territory, orbiting a white dwarf. A structure surrounded by harmonic signatures, stronger than anything they'd seen. Rafik looked at the readout. The source, the Continuum Core. Miller watched the coordinates pulse. "That's their command brain," he said. "Plot the course." The Osiris remained above Atish's night side, while salvage drones scoured the debris field. The light from the burning surface reached up through the black clouds and painted the hull in slow waves of red. It looked as if the ship were afloat on liquid fire. "Status on ground recovery?" Miller asked. Rafik kept his eyes on the tactical overlay. "Sergeant Tadesse is routing a package through Wren's terminal. Data from the alien tower. The signal's still running even after collapse." Wren adjusted the translation filters. "It's not just data. It's pattern echoes. Battle recordings. They stored memories in light." The holographic display filled with images, spectral and incomplete. Alien formations moving in precise geometry. Humans mirrored against them like ghosts. Each battle reformed and vanished, replaying itself in loop. In every simulation, the Kratari lost faster, the rhythms breaking sooner. "They were studying us," Rafik murmured, "and losing." Leclerc turned from the engineering pit. "Reactor output back to 90%. We can fight again." "Good," Miller said, "because this isn't over." Hours passed while teams retrieved the wounded and sealed the hull. In the silence between orders, the men watched the planet burning below. Atish's glass planes had melted into wide seas of orange light, cooling slowly. Somewhere beneath that crust lay the ruins of the harmonic generator. On the bridge, Wren brought up the intercepted coordinates again. Confirmed. The signal points to Thalcor Se, and there's something else encoded in the transmission. A phrase in broken English. The speakers crackled, carrying a distorted whisper. Wait, for echo. Rafik frowned. They want us to come. Miller looked at the map, the white dwarf and the ringed structure pulsing like a heartbeat. Then we'll answer. Aboard the dropship, Tades sat among his squad, helmets off for the first time in days. The air smelled of coolant and scorched metal. No one spoke. He replayed the battle in his mind, the reflections, the silence after each burst, the tower collapsing like a dying star. He wondered how much of himself was still reflected somewhere in that glass. The intercom clicked. "Sergeant," came Rafik's voice. "Debrief postponed. Captain wants all units refit and ready. New objective inbound." Tades closed his eyes, feeling the vibration of the ship's engines through the deck. Understood. He didn't ask where they were going. Everyone already knew. On the Osiris bridge, final diagnostics scrolled in green. Petrescu's navigation readouts showed a narrow jump corridor forming at the edge of the system. The twin suns of Marrow Gate had become a distant shimmer behind them. Miller stood beside the command rail, the reflection of Atish's dying light crawling up his uniform. "Transmit to the fleet. Resupply what you can. Jettison what you can't. We jump in 6 hours." Rafik glanced over. "Sir, we'll be deep in their space. If this is a trap—" "It is a trap," Miller said. "But it's also the only door left open. We end it where it began." He turned toward the viewport. In the distance, Atish's molten rivers cooled to black. The stars beyond flickered in a line that pointed toward the white dwarf at Thalcor Se. He felt the weight of the next decision settle like armor around his shoulders. "Plot the course," he repeated quietly. "We go for the core." 6 hours later, the fleet formed up. Engines burned cold blue against the dark. The Osiris took the lead, her hull still scarred, her name barely visible through soot and weld lines. One by one, the escorts aligned behind her, their running lights blinking out as jump systems powered up. Wren's voice came from the comm pit. "All ships report green. Vector locked." Rafik counted down softly. 5, 4, 3. Space folded around them. The burning world vanished, leaving only its reflection in memory. The fleet burst from the jump into the dim light of a white dwarf. The glow was cold and sharp, like sunlight filtered through bone. Hanging in its orbit was the Kratari home system, and above the methane seas of Thalcor Se rose a structure vast enough to eclipse the horizon, a ring of living metal, alive with pulse and light. Wren whispered, "The Continuum Core." Rafik's sensors showed thousands of harmonic signatures blooming across the ring. "They're already aware of us." Miller's eyes stayed on the image. "Good," he said. "Then they know we're coming." The Osiris rolled her bow toward the glowing ring, drives igniting. The fleet followed in silent formation, streaks of blue fire cutting across the pale light of the dwarf star. The light of the white dwarf fell cold across the bridge of the Osiris. It was pale and cold, washing out the color from every surface. Outside the forward screens, Thalcor Se's methane clouds boiled under that dead sun. Above them, hanging in orbit like a god's crown, turned the Continuum Core, a ring of living metal the size of a continent, its inner surface alive with slow blue pulse. Each heartbeat of light carried orders to what was left of the Kratari fleets. Captain Dave Miller stood at the command rail and felt the vibration of the drives through his boots. "Report." "Fleet in position," Rafik al-Qadim answered. 5 ships remain operational. All rail batteries loaded. Drop unit standing by. Signal strength? Stable. On the display, the core brightened, the pulses accelerating until the pattern became a solid glow. Vauquel's voice came through the static, a low, layered tone that the translators could barely hold. Words formed and broke apart again. Human pattern. Ends. Here. Miller's face stayed expressionless. Rafik, commence Operation Final Silence. The fleet advanced, engines burning white against the dwarf's glare. The first wave of drones came from the core's shadow. Hundreds, then thousands, moving in exact formation. Their plasma filaments crisscrossed like netting, each line of fire folded back on itself, a lattice of light that filled the void. Range 4,000, Petrescu said. Target lock unreliable. Then don't lock, Miller replied. Manual targeting, staggered volleys. The Osiris's rails thundered. Tungsten rounds ripped through the swarm, each slug glowing as it passed through vacuum. When they struck, the drones burst soundlessly, scattering shards that spun like snow. Morrigan followed suit, her salvos out of rhythm by design. The chaos tore holes through the perfect geometry of the alien net. Still, the core brightened. A harmonic tremor rolled through every hull. Consoles flickered, screens smeared into bands of color. Voices cut into static. Leclerc shouted over the noise, "They're hitting the comm arrays directly. Resonance overload." "Cut the grid," Miller ordered. "Hard line only." The bridge dimmed as non-essential systems shut down. For a moment, the Osiris felt like a drifting wreck. Then, Rafik's manual links came online, thick cables running from console to console. Light returned in thin stripes. "Signal restored," he said. "We can still talk." Tadess's voice came through the channel, faint under interference. "Drop teams ready. We're green. Go!" The pods launched from the Osiris's belly, streaking toward the core like sparks from a forge. As they fell, the Kratari opened the outer shields, a skin of translucent matter that rippled like water. Several pods vaporized on contact. The rest punched through, trailing smoke. Inside, Tadess's team slammed onto a surface that felt alive. Each step sent ripples running in concentric circles. Blue light pulsed beneath their feet. In the distance towered the core's neural pillars, cables thicker than buildings, alive with crawling energy. Between them moved figures. Kratari warforms, their bodies stretched thin by the pressure of command resonance. "Charges set for corridor breach," Tadess said, "moving to central spine." The air vibrated with subsonic rhythm. It wasn't sound. It was the pulse of the entire continuum talking to itself. The men's helmets shivered from the pressure. They advanced anyway, firing short, controlled bursts. Every shot shattered fragments of living metal that bled light instead of fluid. Above them, the fleet fought through concentric rings of defense. Tlaloc took a full plasma beam to her engines. The ship split in two, her stern tumbling silently into the planet's haze. Morrigan covered the gap, burning through the debris field while her armor boiled away. Rafik coordinated the remaining ships into a wedge, forcing a path straight toward the core's heart. "Miller," he said, "window opening. 10 seconds for clean shot." "Leclerc." "Reactor at 110%, came the reply, Sabai. "Any higher and we melt the containment." "Hold it there. Petrescu, align the rails." The Osiris rolled onto her side, engines flaring. The white dwarf's gravity pulled at her hull until the frame groaned. The targeting reticle steadied on the core's central ring, a circular aperture radiating energy like breath. "Fire on my mark," Miller said. 3, 2. The channel erupted with Tadess's voice. "Charges placed. Detonating. 1." The rails fired. 6 tungsten slugs tore through the void, each wrapped in plasma that burned brighter than the sun behind them. A heartbeat later, the seismic charges inside the core detonated. The 2 impacts met in the same instant. The explosion was soundless but vast. Light spread outward in a wave that blinded every sensor. The core's ring flexed, cracked, and began to tear itself apart. Segments folded inward like petals consumed by fire. Drones lost guidance, spinning out of control before disintegrating. Across every band of communication came the last transmission of Voqual. No words this time, only a descending tone that faded into silence. On the surface of Thalcorsay, the reflection of that light turned the methane seas into mirrors. For a moment, the whole world seemed to hold its breath. Then the pieces of the core began to fall, burning through the clouds in trails of blue flame. "Confirmed detonation," Rafik said quietly. "Confirmed," Leclerc answered. "All hostile signals offline. Continuum core destroyed." The bridge went still. Only the low hum of cooling rails filled the air. Outside, fragments of alien metal drifted past, glowing like coals before the cold swallowed them. Petrescu exhaled. "It's over." Miller watched the debris field turn slowly, each piece catching the light of the dwarf star. "Transmit to all ships," he said. "Mission complete. Begin withdrawal." Hours later, as the fleet regrouped beyond the gravity well, the wreckage of the core formed a broken halo around the planet. Tedessa's dropship limped back to the Osiris, its hull scorched black. Of his team, less than half returned. They stepped onto the hangar deck in silence, helmets under their arms, eyes hollow from what they'd seen. Rafik met them there. "You did it," he said simply. Tadesse nodded. So did everyone else. Miller stood at the viewport above the hangar, looking out at the dark. The dwarf star burned behind the planet like a candle behind glass. The war had lasted 3 years. In the end, it had taken 12 minutes to finish. He keyed the fleet-wide channel. "To all Terran vessels, Operation Final Silence accomplished. The continuum is neutralized. You've done your duty. We go home." No cheers answered him, only the sound of engines spooling up. The crews were too tired for celebration. When the Osiris turned away from Thalcorsay, the planet's surface glimmered with falling debris, each fragment tracing a thin blue line down through the clouds. Rafik joined him at the viewport. "Will they rebuild?" he asked. Miller shook his head. "Maybe. But not soon. We've shown them what happens when you play without rhythm." He switched off the comms and watched the white dwarf shrink behind them until it was only a point of light. "Set course for Helion," he said. The ship answered with a rising hum. One by one, the escorts followed, engines cutting lines of blue fire across the black. The reflections of their burns merged and faded, leaving the system dark again.
Hey there, space human. I'm really curious about your thoughts on this video. Drop a quick comment and let me know what's on your mind. Or just say hi if you prefer. Either way, I'd love to hear from you. Also, remember to check the pinned comment. Trust me, it's worth a look. Oh, and one last thing. I've chosen another video for you to watch. Just click the card here, or here if you want the whole playlist. See you there.